I need to tell you something that took me 15 years to find out, and I am angry that nobody told me sooner. My name is Arthur. I am 72 years old, and what I'm about to share with you has been sitting in plain sight this entire time, buried under decades of supermarket advertising, frozen dinner promotions, and the quiet, calculated effort of an industry that makes billions of pounds every single year from your helplessness in the kitchen. They knew exactly what they were doing when they replaced your grandmother's recipes with plastic trays and microwave instructions. And I can prove it. But first, I need you to hear this number. 400 million. That is how many tins of Heinz tomato soup were sold in Britain in 1965 alone. Not because people had forgotten how to make soup, because an industry had spent 20 years convincing them they were too busy, too tired, or too incompetent to do it themselves. Your grandmother was not incompetent. She was systematically replaced. Here is what they buried. Here is what she knew that they do not want you to remember. In 1946, the year after the war ended, the Ministry of Food published a pamphlet called Cooking for One, specifically for elderly citizens living alone. It recommended one-pot meals, not just for convenience, but for nutrition. It proved that slow-cooked dishes retain more vitamins than quick frying. It stated clearly that the liquid from boiled vegetables must always be consumed, never poured away. That pamphlet was quietly discontinued as convenience food companies began lobbying government nutrition bodies in the 1950s. I am not making this up. The financial interests of the processed food industry and the nutritional guidance given to elderly people in this country began to diverge at exactly the same moment that supermarket ready meals started appearing on shelves. Your grandmother's recipes did not disappear because they stopped working. They disappeared because they were too cheap, too simple, and too effective for any company to profit from. Let me show you what I mean. The first recipe they buried was porridge. Real porridge. 1 cup of oats, 2 cups of water, a pinch of salt added the night before so the grain softens while you sleep. 5 minutes of simmering in the morning. Cost, less than 5 pence a serving in today's money when bought as loose oats. They replaced it with individual sachets of instant porridge, 50 pence each, 11 times the cost, less nutritious, more sugar. The oats pre-processed to the point where your body absorbs the sugars faster than nature ever intended. And here is what they never put in the advertisement. The salt added the night before is not a tip or a trick. It is chemistry. The salt begins to break down the outer bran layer of the oat overnight, allowing the grain to absorb water more slowly and evenly during cooking. The result is a texture, genuinely creamy from the inside out, that no instant sachet can replicate, regardless of how much you stir it. My mother saved the cream from the top of the milk bottle, that thick layer that gathered beneath the foil cap, and stirred it through at the last moment. We thought she was being extravagant. She was being clever. A bag of oats costs less than £1 and lasts a fortnight. That is breakfast for 2 weeks for less than £1. The industry did not improve your breakfast. It extracted profit from it. There is a difference. The second recipe they buried was Scotch broth. Pearl barley, almost impossible to find in a major supermarket today, despite costing pennies per portion and providing more fibre, more slow-release energy, and more satiety than anything in the ready meal aisle. The National Food Survey of 1958 recorded steady barley consumption among pensioners. By 1990, it had collapsed. Not because barley stopped being nutritious, because nobody was selling it, promoting it, or reminding anyone it existed. The secret of Scotch broth is not the meat, which you barely need. It is the barley. A small piece of scrag end, the cheapest cut available, diced carrot and turnip, a leek if you have one, a handful of pearl barley, everything into the pot with enough cold water to cover. Brought slowly to a simmer and then left completely alone. The barley swells and thickens the broth as it cooks until you have something closer to a stew than a soup, something that coats the spoon and fills the belly in a way that a tin of anything never manages. I make it on a Monday morning and it keeps going until Wednesday. The flavour deepens each time I reheat it. The second serving is better than the first. The third is better still. Total cost for the whole pot, less than 80p. Now here is the part that made me genuinely furious when I found it out. In the 1960s, district nurses, real NHS community nurses going door to door, were teaching elderly patients living alone how to cook. They had specific recipes, written down, distributed as handwritten sheets in some areas. One of them was the cheese and onion pot, a small onion softened in butter, cubed potatoes simmered in milk until tender, topped with grated cheddar and grilled until bubbling. One saucepan, eaten directly from the pot. Total cost in 1963, less than a shilling. Those nurses were teaching this because elderly people living alone were malnourished, not because there was no food, because they had been told, by advertising, by convenience culture, by the quiet social pressure of modernity, that cooking for one person was not worth the effort. The effort was never the problem. The profit motive was the problem. And the cheese and onion pot is not just economical. The milk reduces slightly as the potatoes cook, absorbing the starch and becoming something almost velvety. The cheddar under the grill for 2 minutes forms a crust that breaks when you press it with a spoon. The whole thing holds heat for a long time in the pot. For those of us who eat slowly, or who get distracted, or whose hands are not always steady, that matters more than most cookery writers ever acknowledge. Let me tell you what egg drop soup costs. You boil water. You crumble in half an OXO cube. You beat 1 egg in a cup and pour it slowly into the bubbling stock while you stir gently. The egg sets into silky golden ribbons. Add whatever you have, frozen peas, leftover cabbage, a few shreds of anything. 5 minutes, 1 pot, 1 cup, supper. In 1962, a single egg cost less than 2p. Today, it costs approximately 20p. A serving of egg drop soup costs 20p in 2026. A supermarket single-serve soup costs between £1.50 and £2.50. The industry charges you 12 times more for something demonstrably inferior. District nurses in Sheffield reportedly taught this recipe to elderly patients who struggled with complex cooking. The protein from the egg, the warmth of the broth, the ease of preparation. Nothing about this recipe has changed in 60 years, only the price of ignoring it. They are not feeding you, they are financing themselves on your convenience. And the ready meal industry knew something else, something darker. They knew that loneliness makes people stop cooking. They knew that when a spouse dies, when children move away, when the house goes quiet, the motivation to cook a proper meal collapses. And they positioned their products, their plastic trays, their foil-covered portions, their microwave instructions, precisely at that moment of vulnerability. I know this because I was that person. My wife Margaret died in 2009, and for 15 years I ate exactly what they wanted me to eat. I handed them my money and my health, 1 microwave lasagna at a time. And I did it because nobody told me the alternative was this simple. The alternative was always this simple. Lentil soup with bacon. 1 rasher of bacon, chopped and fried until crisp. A sliced onion, a diced carrot. Half a cup of red lentils. No soaking, no fuss. 20 minutes from dry to done. A pint of water or stock. Simmered until the lentils collapse into something thick and warming and complete. Red lentils were my mother's secret weapon, and I had forgotten them entirely for 40 years. Unlike dried beans, they need no overnight soaking. You put them in dry, and 20 minutes later they have dissolved into a thick orange soup that smells of everything right about winter cooking. They cost almost nothing. A pound of red lentils costs less than £1 sterling and makes enough soup for a week. District nurses in Manchester distributed the recipe on handwritten sheets throughout the 1960s to elderly patients on limited budgets. Protein from the lentils, fat from the bacon, vitamins from the vegetables, a complete meal in 1 pot, Total cost, less than £1 for 2 full days of eating. I am telling you now, and I want you to understand that your anger at this information is appropriate. Welsh rarebit, not cheese on toast, but something far superior. Cheddar grated into a small pan with a splash of milk, a teaspoon of mustard, a drop of Worcestershire sauce, a beaten egg, stirred over low heat until it thickens into something you could almost eat with a spoon, poured over toast and grilled until golden. The mustard is not optional. It reacts with the cheese proteins during heating and produces a depth of flavour that plain melted cheese never achieves. This is why every pub kitchen in Britain uses mustard in Welsh rarebit, not for the taste of mustard, which largely disappears into the heat, but for what it does to the cheese. Your grandmother knew this. She did not know the chemistry. She knew that it tasted better with mustard, and she never stopped. In 1962, the ingredients cost less than £1 and provided a complete supper. The first time I made it properly, stirred slowly over low heat, not rushed, with real cheddar and real mustard, I sat down at the kitchen table and felt something I had not felt in a long time. Proper contentment. Not because of the food itself, though it was very good, because I had made it. Because I had taken almost nothing and produced something that tasted like it came from somewhere that cared about the person eating it. Chicken soup from a carcass. When I buy a chicken now, I use it 3 times. The first day, roasted. The second day, cold slices with pickles. The third day, the carcass into a pot with an onion, a carrot, a stick of celery, and enough cold water to cover. 2 hours at a gentle simmer. The bones release collagen, gelatin, and minerals into the liquid in a way that no commercial stock has ever replicated. The gelatin is what makes a proper chicken broth coat the back of a spoon. It is what makes it feel warming in a way that goes beyond temperature. No laboratory has produced a carton of chicken stock that does what a domestic pot and a leftover carcass and 2 hours of patience produces. This costs nothing, absolutely nothing beyond the time. My mother never threw away a chicken carcass in her life. I threw them away for 40 years. I will not throw another one away as long as I live. The industry replaced this with cartons of chicken stock at £1.80. Inferior in every measurable way, 12 times the cost. They convinced us that the bones were waste. The bones are not waste. They are the most nutritious part of the animal, and they are free. Macaroni cheese made properly, in the same pot as the pasta. Boil the macaroni until almost tender, drain it, return it to the pot with a knob of butter, a splash of milk, and a big handful of grated cheddar. Stir over low heat until the cheese melts into a sauce that clings to every piece of pasta. A scrape of mustard powder. Breadcrumbs from day-old bread browned under the grill for a crust. In 1958, one portion cost less than 9p. The ready-meal version costs 8 times as much and tastes of nothing but salt and a vague memory of cheese. What it cannot reproduce is the pull of real melting cheese, the way it stretches between the fork and the bowl, the smell of butter and mustard, the warmth of the bowl between the hands when you hold it in a quiet kitchen on a winter evening. That warmth is real. It is not something a microwave can produce. Not the same warmth, not even close. And the last one, the one my mother made every Sunday without fail. Stewed shin of beef. A small piece of cheap shin, 4 ounces, browned in a pot with a sliced onion until the bottom of the pot is dark and fragrant with caramelized meat. Stock or water added to cover, along with a carrot, a potato, a bay leaf, and whatever herbs grow on the windowsill. Simmered slowly for 2 to 3 hours at the lowest heat your stove will produce. Shin of beef is one of the cheapest cuts available precisely because it requires time. It contains collagen, a structural protein found in working muscles, which breaks down during long, slow cooking into gelatin. That gelatin is what makes the gravy thick without any added flour or starch. It is what gives it that coat the back of the spoon quality that you cannot fake. The cheap cut becomes the right cut when you give it time. In 1955, shin cost 9p a pound. A 4-ounce piece cost less than 3p, 2 portions, each more satisfying than any ready meal ever made. The pot sits on the back of the stove, requiring nothing but patience. The smell fills the house. It is the smell of something being properly made, and when you sit down to eat it, you are not just eating a meal, you are eating the proof that cooking for one person is not a consolation prize. It is not making do. It is, when done with care and patience and the knowledge your grandmother carried, one of the most dignified things a person can do for themselves. I am going to say something plainly now. Every elderly person eating a cold, ready meal alone tonight has been systematically failed, not by their own abilities, by a food industry that made a deliberate, profitable decision to replace the knowledge your grandmother spent a lifetime accumulating with a shelf of products that cost 10 times more and nourished 10 times less. They did not improve the stew. They extracted profit from the concept of stew. Here is what I want you to do. This week, just one thing. Make one of these: the cheese and onion pot, the lentil soup with bacon, the stewed shin of beef. Make it slowly, eat it at your own table. See if it does not taste better than anything wrapped in plastic that you have eaten in years. Then tell me the ready meal was better. Tell me you would rather hand £4.50 to an industry that has been profiting from your learned helplessness for 60 years. I already know what you will say. Leave a comment below. Tell me what your grandmother made that you have stopped making. And if you know someone living alone who has given up cooking, a neighbour, a friend, a family member, please share this with them. It might be the most useful thing they see all week. The knowledge was never lost. It was buried, and now you have it back. Subscribe. I will be here every week. There is a great deal more to uncover. There is something else I want to tell you about the tin tomato soup. Not the soup itself, the ritual. Your grandmother did not serve Heinz tomato soup straight from the can. She poured it into a small saucepan, added a splash of milk to stretch it further, and heated it slowly until it steamed without boiling. A teaspoon of sugar if it tasted too sharp, a spoonful of cream if company was expected. The bread was cut into soldiers, the same soldiers she had cut for sick children decades before. Thick slices of white bread with real butter. By 1965, Heinz sold over 400 million tins of tomato soup in Britain. Doctors in the 1950s actually recommended it for elderly patients, praising its consistency and ease of digestion. For those living alone, the ritual of the soup, the small saucepan, the bread soldiers, the familiar orange-red colour, was not poverty. It was comfort made affordable. It was knowing that something reliable waited for you at the end of a day. The industry has since convinced us that tin soup is embarrassing, that proper people make soup from scratch or buy it fresh from the chiller cabinet at £3 a carton. But the chiller cabinet carton of soup contains roughly the same ingredients as the tin, costs 4 times as much, has a shorter shelf life and, if we are being entirely honest, does not taste meaningfully better. Let me also tell you about leek and potato soup, because the Welsh have known something about this combination for longer than any gastropub has been charging £7 for it. 2 leeks, sliced thin, softened in a knob of butter. 2 peeled and cubed potatoes added with enough water to cover. Simmered until soft, then mashed roughly with a fork so the soup thickens without a drop of actual cream. The fork is important. A blender makes it smooth and anonymous. The fork leaves it textured and real. You can still feel the potato in it, which means it tastes like something rather than nothing. In 1960, leeks sold for 3p a bunch at markets across Wales and the north. A retired schoolteacher in Swansea made leek and potato soup every Monday using the tops of leeks the greengrocer gave away free, because he was going to throw them away otherwise. Nothing wasted, nothing complicated. 1 pot, 1 spoon, the taste of home. And peas porridge. I want to say a word about peas porridge because I know it sounds too old, too simple, too humble to mention. Dried split peas simmered in water until they collapse into a thick, savoury mush. A ham bone adds flavour if you have one. A knob of butter stirred in at the end. Bread for dipping. That is all. This dish appears in nursery rhymes because it appeared on nursery tables for centuries. Not because people were too poor to do better, but because it worked. It nourished, it warmed, it satisfied, it cost almost nothing, and it could sit on the back of the stove all day waiting for whoever was hungry. For elderly people on fixed incomes, the freedom to eat when hunger strikes rather than when the schedule demands is not a small thing. It is a significant act of independence.